You could still leave the factory, you could still leave the office, and go into viable neighborhoods where people knew each other, where support networks existed in communities, even in large cities. I was born in New York and spent the greater part of my life there. And I recall a city of 1,000 villages. 1,000 villages, rich in its ethnicity, rich in its cultural variety, rich in its inwardness and its capacity to be supportive, and yet cosmopolitan in its mentality owing to the tremendous flow of cultural variety that gave that city its paramount importance, at least in the United States, culturally and politically. So we had something to retreat from before the Second World War. We could leave the rationalized factory where we were time studied and motion studied. We could leave the office and we could go home, where home was something that was not of a market world, where the relationship was not defined by money, where the relationship was not defined by commerce, where you had, in fact, an eco-community, even if it had no contact with the land, not to speak of the extent to which, throughout so much of the world, and indeed so much of the United States and Canada, so much of North America generally, there were still viable small towns, which for all their defects, and I know them, patriarchal at times, parochial, inward, isolated, but still supportive of personality and producing strong individuals, in whom the spirit of rebellion, when it arose, had a basis, had roots in a society that was truly communal, could then go out and strike forward and try to change the world because they felt empowered, because they felt that they could say something, that they could do something, that it counted if they intervened, that the forces as yet were not so gigantic, the corporations were not so massive, the state was not so centralized and ubiquitous and all present, the information was not so retrievable, thank God. The police cars as yet were just getting used to using radio. There were no memory banks. You still had to use 3x5 cards. Everybody wasn't fingerprinted. Everybody didn't have a social security or other form of number. Everybody didn't have a police record, whether guilty, innocent, innocuous, or dangerous. And out of that unified community, for all its shortcomings, that pre-industrial world that you could still retire to, that world which still had contact even then with the land, because I remember even in my New York, which was at that time the greatest metropolitan area in the world, with the possible exception perhaps of London, you could still walk from my neighborhood into not only parks but small farms that were right nearby. You bought live chickens, you bought live fish, you went to grocery stores, not shopping malls. You went to fish and poultry stores. You went to vegetable stores. The owners knew you, you knew them. There was a simple intercourse and even a basic humanity in the interchange, such that in the Great Depression you could draw on credit for a month until something came in the form of welfare or a paycheck. That world, with its mom and pop stores and its intimacy and its neighborhood sense of community, and its support system, produced as well emotionally strong people in varying degrees, who could stand up, could be counted, who could want to change things, who felt the sense of empowerment because they had a base, a power base in the community. And they in themselves were living an ecological way of life without even knowing it. They were rooted as a plant is rooted. And they were nourished by those roots as a plant is nourished. So in that form of community life, even then with the development of corporations, with the development of trusts, you still had the community support that gave you the opportunity to strike back, to be angry, and to feel that you could collect into a force and to change something in your world, that you had control over your destiny, that you had a sense of destiny, and that you had a place in that world which was not constrictive but supportive. The crisis of our time has not only been the advance of technology, of a domineering technology, on a scale that would have been inconceivable when I was the age of many people in this audience, the advance of science and its application in a systematic, rationalized fashion. The crisis of our time has not only been an epistemology or an outlook or sensibility that orders everything pyramidally on an order of 1 to 10, not in a participatory fashion, and I'll get to that later. It has been also the encroachment of that market world into every recess of our lives, especially since the end of the Second World War, and particularly with the beginning of the 1950s. We are now totally invaded human beings. We are invaded by mass media. We are invaded by advertising. We are invaded by a steady stream of merchandisers and operators. Our lives have been totally marketized, totally commercialized. The community ties that held us together and gave us the integrity of our own individuality are being torn asunder by the shopping malls, by the high-rise buildings, by the so-called wide open spaces that separate people as surely as walls, by the lawns that separate even the suburbs, by the shared fear of each other that pervades all our giant cities, such that when someone is walking behind you in New York, you panic. And if someone comes up to you and says, "Could you tell me where?" you immediately walk away instead of answering or giving directions. When you go into the subway, you huddle. You have to retreat into a corner and not be noticed. And it'll come here too. Because it's in the nature of things that this is the way it is developing. The community support systems have been eroded by the shopping malls. They've been eroded by the large corporations. They've been undermined by the invasion of a market mentality added on to this order of 1 to 10 hierarchical sensibility, of a buyer-seller mentality, and of a fear, a mutual fear of people of each other. So that to be addressed, to be greeted, to be hailed by a stranger is frightening. It causes panic. Am I going to be attacked? Am I going to be mugged? Am I going to be raped? Am I going to be killed? And that is the normal atmosphere in the giant cities of the world today. The abnormal one is when you say, "Oh, hello." Or you're willing to shake someone's hand, or you're willing to even greet someone with a smile who smiles at you. Because a smile in the big cities of the world today is an act of aggression. It's threatening, it's menacing, it's like a snarl on a dog's face. There must be something abnormal with someone who smiles at you. The anonymity of the city is the only thing that characterizes the city. To look straight ahead and notice nothing, neither the bodies that lie beside you, to step over them if necessary. I've seen that. I don't have to be told that. So that market world has invaded and corroded and undermined all these ties, has monetized them, has given them a price tag. That's what we ask for. What is the price tag on this thing? We attach price tags to religion. We attach price tags to love. We attach price tags to friendship. We attach price tags to almost every aspect of our life, whether knowingly or unknowingly. So we have not only undermined these inter-social relationships of community, we have undermined the most fundamental things that make for personality itself. And with that, finally, we have no place